My son buried me before I was dead. While I was fighting for my life in a Swiss medical center, Trevor was already spending my inheritance. The farm that my grandfather built in 1924, that I worked for 43 years, that survived the Dust Bowl and 3 recessions gone, sold in 72 hours for $3.2 million. When I found out, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to explain. I smiled. You see, Trevor made one fatal mistake when he decided to celebrate my death. He invited the whole town to watch him do it, and in 3 weeks, at his $150,000 wedding paid for, with my money, I was going to give everyone a show they'd never forget. Some people think when you've been pronounced dead, you lose your fight. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. March 15th, 2024. I was lying in a hospital bed in Zurich, Switzerland, tubes running out of my chest like some kind of science experiment. Experimental cardiac surgery, they called it. My heart had given up on me after 70 years of Kansas winters and Vietnam summers. The doctors gave me a 30% chance, maybe less. I'd called Trevor before the surgery. My only son, 41 years old, married to Madison, that Instagram princess who thought farming was something poor people did. I told him I loved him, told him to take care of the land if something happened to me. Don't worry about anything, Dad, he said. Just focus on getting better. 3 days later, while I was still unconscious in intensive care, Trevor was at First National Bank of Riverside with a power of attorney I'd signed 2 years ago. The kind you sign when you're being responsible, when you trust your family. The Sullivan family farm, 2,000 acres of the richest soil in Kansas. Corn, wheat, soybeans. The house where I was born, where Trevor was born, where his grandfather died. Worth $3.2 million on a bad day. Trevor sold it in one afternoon. But here's what really gets me. He didn't wait to see if I'd pull through. Didn't wait for a funeral. Hell, he didn't even wait for a death certificate. The doctors had told him I was critical. Touch and go. That was enough for him. By day 5, while I was learning to breathe on my own again, Trevor had bought himself a metallic blue Porsche Cayenne. $85,000. Cash. I found the receipt later. March 20th. Same day the cardiologist told me I was going to live. Madison posted about it on Facebook. A picture of her leaning against the hood, designer sunglasses, perfect smile. The caption read, "Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need when you need it. Blessed and grateful. Hashtag new beginnings. Hashtag living our best life." 47 likes, including 3 from my neighbors. But that wasn't the worst part. Oh no. Trevor was just getting started. He booked a 3-week European vacation. First-class flights to Paris, London, home. 5-star hotels. Private tours. $45,000 total. I saw the travel agent's confirmation email later. Madison had forwarded it to her sister, bragging about their inheritance windfall. Then came the wedding planning. See, Trevor and Madison had been engaged for 2 years, talking about a small ceremony, maybe at the local church, nothing fancy. His teacher's salary and her part-time photography business didn't exactly scream luxury wedding. But suddenly, with Daddy's farm money burning a hole in their pockets, everything changed. Riverside Country Club, the most expensive venue in 3 counties. Minimum 200 guests. Premium bar package, 7-course dinner. The deposit alone was $25,000. Madison's dress? Vera Wang. $8,000 for one day. The photographer? Some hotshot from Kansas City who usually shoots celebrity weddings. $12,000. Flowers? $15,000. Because apparently regular roses weren't good enough anymore. Had to be white orchids and peonies flown in from Ecuador. I'm lying there in that Swiss hospital bed, learning to walk again, and these two are planning the wedding of the century with my life's work. But you know what really twisted the knife? Trevor's Facebook post from March 28th. A picture of him signing the wedding venue contract, big smile, arm around Madison. The post said, "Dad would have wanted us to be happy. He always said life's too short to wait for tomorrow. Using our inheritance to build the life he'd be proud of. Miss you, old man. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag new chapter." 312 likes, including our pastor. Our inheritance, Not his inheritance, ours. Like Madison had somehow earned the right to spend 4 generations of Sullivan sweat and sacrifice. I screenshotted everything, every post, every photo, every bragging comment. My phone became a museum of their greed. The worst part was watching it happen from 3,000 miles away, helpless. The nurses thought I was depressed about my recovery. They kept offering counseling, antidepressants. They didn't understand that my heart was broken for reasons that had nothing to do with surgery. My neighbor, Bill Morrison, called me on April 2nd. He'd heard about the farm sale through the grapevine, wanted to offer his condolences. Hell, Frank, if I'd known you were still kicking, I'd have made Trevor a counteroffer myself. That land's been in your family forever. That's when it hit me. The whole town thought I was dead or dying. Trevor hadn't just stolen my farm. He'd stolen my legacy, my reputation, my place in the community. While I was fighting to live, he was erasing me like I'd already been buried. But I wasn't buried. Not yet. And Trevor was about to learn that some fights don't end just because you think your opponent is down. The wedding was set for May 18th, 8 weeks away. 8 weeks for me to get strong enough to make the trip home. 8 weeks for them to spend more of my money and dig their hole deeper. 8 weeks to plan my resurrection. April 10th. That's the day I learned exactly what my son really thought of me. I'd been calling home every few days, checking in. The calls always went to voicemail. Hi, this is Trevor and Madison. We're probably off living our best life. That kind of garbage. I figured they were busy with wedding planning or maybe still in Europe spending my money. But that Tuesday morning, Swiss time around 2 p.m., someone actually picked up. Hello? Madison's voice, annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. Madison, it's Frank. I've been trying to reach... Oh. Long pause. Frank, hi. We thought... Trevor said you were... How are you feeling? Something in her tone made me hit the record button on my phone. Old military habit. Document everything. I'm doing much better. The doctors say I can fly home next week. I wanted to talk to Trevor about the farm, about what happened while I was... Actually, Frank, that's not really a good idea right now. Excuse me? Trevor's been through a lot. The stress of thinking you might, die, and then all the arrangements he had to make. He's finally in a good place mentally, and we don't want to upset that balance. I could feel my blood pressure rising. Upset the balance? Madison, he sold my farm. He sold his inheritance, the farm you were going to leave him anyway. He just got it a little early. A little early? I'm not dead, Madison. Silence. Then she sighed, like I was being unreasonable. Frank, you have to understand. You're 70 years old. You just had major surgery. Your heart could give out any day. Trevor needed to think about his future, our future. We can't put our lives on hold indefinitely. That's when Trevor's voice came through the background. Is that him? Tell him I'm not ready to talk. Trevor wants you to know he's not ready for this conversation, Madison said. Maybe in a few months, when things settle down. Things settle down? What things? He took my life's work and bought himself a sports car. Madison's voice got colder. That's not fair, Frank. Trevor has been carrying the burden of your medical expenses, your care, the farm maintenance, everything. He deserves something for himself. Medical expenses? My insurance covers everything. And what farm maintenance? He sold it. Look, Frank. Her tone changed completely. Sharp now. Dismissive. I'm going to be honest with you because someone needs to. You're old. You're sick. And frankly, you're becoming a burden on people who are trying to build their own lives. I couldn't breathe. This little girl who'd been eating at my table for 3 years, who I'd welcomed into my family, was talking to me like I was some kind of charity case. Trevor has spent the last 5 years waiting for you to retire, waiting for you to step aside, waiting for his chance to actually live, instead of taking care of an old man who can't accept that his time is over. Madison, that farm has been in my family for 100 years. Yes, we know. You've told that story 1,000,000 times. But Trevor isn't you. He doesn't want to spend his life covered in dirt, worried about weather and crop prices. He wants more than that. We want more than that. Trevor's voice again, closer to the phone now. Tell him we're building something better, something he never had the vision to create. Madison continued, getting bolder. The truth is, Frank, that farm was holding Trevor back. Holding us back. You were never going to let him make real decisions or modernize anything. It was always, that's not how we do things. Or, your grandfather wouldn't approve. Well, your grandfather is dead, Frank, and you almost were too. My hands were shaking. Not from the surgery, from rage. So Trevor made an executive decision, she went on. He took control of his own destiny. And honestly, you should be proud of him for finally standing up to you. Standing up to me? Yes. For once in his life, he put his own happiness first instead of living under your judgment. We're using that money to build a real life, a modern life, not some museum to the past that nobody cares about anymore. That's when Trevor took the phone. Dad? His voice was different, harder. Madison's right. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I need you to understand something. I love you, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being your shadow. That farm was a prison you built and wanted me to inherit. Trevor, son, we can talk about this. We can. No, Dad, we can't, because you'll never see it our way. You'll never understand that some people want more than to wake up at 5 a.m. and worry about corn futures. Some people have bigger dreams. Like what? Like spending other people's money? Like building something that matters. Madison and I are going to travel. We're going to experience culture. We're going to live in the real world instead of hiding in some rural bubble, pretending it's still 1950. Madison's voice in the background. Tell him about the wedding gift idea. Oh, right. Dad, we want you to know that when we get married next month, we're going to donate some of the proceeds to a charity that helps elderly people transition to assisted living. In your honor, we think you'd appreciate that. The line went quiet, except for my heartbeat in my ears. Dad, are you there? I'm here, son. Good. Look, I know this is hard, but it's what's best for everyone. You can focus on your recovery, and we can focus on our future. Clean break, fresh start. I smiled then. They couldn't see it, but I smiled. You know what, Trevor? You're absolutely right. Really? Yes, a clean break is exactly what we need. A fresh start. You've made that very clear. Oh, well, good. I'm glad you understand. I understand perfectly. Enjoy the wedding, son. I hope it's everything you dreamed of. I hung up and immediately uploaded the recording to 3 different cloud storage accounts. Fresh start, indeed. April 11th, the day I stopped being Frank Sullivan, loving father, and became Frank Sullivan, tactical operator. I didn't sleep that night, not because of pain or medication, because something had crystallized in my mind during that phone call, something cold and clear as a Kansas winter morning. My son didn't just steal my farm, he stole my dignity, my place in the world, my right to exist in my own family. And that little girl he married, she called me a burden, said I was holding them back, said my time was over. Well, maybe it was time to show them what happens when an old soldier decides his war isn't finished yet. I called my lawyer first thing Swiss morning, which was about midnight back home in Kansas. Jim Patterson had handled my legal work for 20 years. Woke him up, but he didn't complain when I explained the situation. Jesus, Frank, I drew up that power of attorney. It was supposed to be for emergencies. This felt like an emergency to them, Jim. Question is, what are my options? Long pause. Legally, the sale was valid. Trevor had proper authority, the buyer was legitimate. All the paperwork's clean. You could contest it, but that would take years and cost more than the farm's worth. What if I don't want my money back? I'm sorry. What if I want something else? Something more valuable than money? Another pause. Frank, what are you thinking? I'm thinking my son needs to learn a lesson that money can't teach. And I'm thinking his wedding next month might be the perfect classroom. Jim was quiet for a long moment. Frank, you're talking about public humiliation. That's nuclear. Sometimes nuclear is what it takes. Are you sure about this? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. Family relationships, community standing, everything changes. I looked out my hospital window at the Swiss Alps. Beautiful, clean, permanent, like the decision forming in my mind. Jim, let me ask you something. If someone stole everything you built, insulted everything you stood for, and then invited the whole town to celebrate while spending your money, what would you do? I'd probably want to kill them. I don't want to kill anyone. I want to educate them in front of everyone they're trying to impress. Is that legal? Embarrassing your son at his wedding? Yeah, that's legal. Stupid, maybe, but legal. Then here's what I need you to do. I spent the next hour giving Jim his instructions. Research the wedding venue, get me copies of all the contracts Trevor had signed, find out everything about their guest list, their vendors, their timeline. I wanted intelligence, complete intel on Operation Wedding Crash. Next call was to my doctor. Dr. Hoffman, when's the earliest I can fly? Mr. Sullivan, we discussed this. 4 to 6 weeks minimum for international travel. What if it's an emergency? What kind of emergency? The kind where my son is about to make the biggest mistake of his life, and I'm the only one who can stop it. Dr. Hoffman laughed. That's not a medical emergency. Doctor, I've been thinking about this all night. My recovery isn't just about my heart healing, it's about getting back to my life, my responsibilities. Lying in this bed, feeling helpless while my family falls apart, that's not healing, that's dying slowly. He was quiet. If I clear all the medical tests, if I promise to take it easy, if I arrange for medical support in Kansas, can I go home in 2 weeks? 2 weeks? Mr. Sullivan? Doctor, I'm 70 years old. I survived Vietnam. I survived 40 years of farming. I survived experimental heart surgery. What I won't survive is watching my son destroy everything I built while I hide in a hospital bed feeling sorry for myself. Long sigh. You Americans, always in such a hurry. Is that a yes? That's a maybe. We'll run every test twice. You'll sign more waivers than a skydiver. And you'll promise me you're not planning anything physically strenuous. I promise. I'm just going to a wedding. Your son's wedding? That's right. And he knows you're coming? I smiled at the phone. It's going to be a surprise. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and started making lists. Military habit, mission planning, target, Trevor and Madison. Sullivan wedding, May 18th, 4 p.m., Riverside Country Club. Objective, restore honor, establish consequences, reset family hierarchy. Assets, truth, evidence, element of surprise, 200 witnesses. Strategy, shock and awe, followed by methodical evidence presentation. Timeline, 18 days to recovery, travel, and final preparations. I opened a new document and titled it Operation Prodigal Father, because every good operation needs a code name, and this was going to be very, very good. April 26th, the day I landed back in Kansas and started my intelligence gathering operation. Dr. Hoffman wasn't thrilled about releasing me, but I'd passed every test they threw at me. Heart function was at 80%. Blood pressure stable. Mobility improving daily. Most importantly, my mind was sharp as a knife and twice as focused. Jim Patterson picked me up at Kansas City International. 63 years old. Looked like he'd aged 5 years in the 3 weeks since I'd called him. Frank, I've got to ask one more time. Are you absolutely sure about this? Jim, did you get the information I requested? He handed me a manila folder thick as a phone book. Everything you asked for. Venue contracts, vendor agreements, guest list, payment schedules. And Frank, it's worse than you thought. I opened the folder in his passenger seat. The first document was the catering contract. Riverside Country Club. 215 guests confirmed. 7-course dinner, premium bar package, specialty cocktails named after the bride and groom. Total cost, $43,000. Keep reading, Jim said. Photography package, $12,000 for the day, plus $8,000 for engagement photos and wedding album. DJ and band, $9,000 for ceremony music and reception entertainment. Transportation, vintage Rolls-Royce rental for $3,000. Wedding cake, custom 4-tier design, $2,000. Rehearsal dinner, another $8,000 at the country club. Honeymoon, 2 weeks in Belize, first-class flights, oceanfront resort, $22,000. Already booked and paid for. I did the math in my head. $107,000 so far, and that wasn't counting the dress, flowers, or Madison's bachelorette party in Las Vegas. Jesus Christ. There's more. Page 15. I flipped through until I found it. A receipt from Tiffany and Company wedding rings, his and hers matching platinum bands with diamonds, $11,000. They drove to Kansas City to buy these, Jim said. Madison posted about it on Instagram, called it Investing in Forever. With my money. Gets better, page 22. Bachelor party expenses. Trevor had rented a party bus to take 12 of his friends to Kansas City for a weekend. Steakhouse dinners, strip club, high-end hotel suite, top-shelf liquor. $4,000 for one weekend. Jim, pull over. What? Pull over. Now. He pulled into a gas station parking lot. I got out and walked around the car twice, breathing deep, forcing my heart rate down. Getting angry wouldn't help. Getting smart would. When I got back in the car, I was calm again. Show me the social media stuff. Jim had printed out dozens of screenshots. Madison's Instagram was a museum of excess. Photos of her in the $8,000 dress. Pictures of the venue during their tasting dinner. Videos of her opening wedding presents at her shower. But the caption that made my blood run cold was from April 20th. A photo of her and Trevor at some fancy restaurant. Champagne glasses raised. Celebrating our new beginning. Some people spend their whole lives playing it safe, never taking risks, never really living. We choose adventure. We choose to bet on love and follow our dreams. Thank you to everyone who made this possible, especially guardian angels watching from above. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag living boldly. Hashtag no regrets. Guardian angels watching from above. She was talking about me like I was already dead. What's our timeline, Jim? Weddings in 3 weeks. May 18th, Saturday, 4 p.m. ceremony, 6 p.m. reception. Guest list? Everyone. Your neighbors. Trevor's co-workers, Madison's photography clients, half the town. People who've known you since Trevor was born. Perfect. The bigger the audience, the better the lesson. What about vendors? Are they getting paid on time? Jim smiled grimly. Funny you should ask. I made some calls. The florist is nervous. $15,000 is a big order for them, and they usually require payment 2 weeks in advance. Madison's been dodging their calls. Keep going. Photographer wants his balance paid before the ceremony. DJ's been calling every day. Even the country club is asking for final payment confirmation. They're running out of my money. Looks like it. Best I can tell, they've spent about 90% of the farm sale proceeds. Wedding costs, cars, vacation, living expenses. There's maybe $300,000 left in Trevor's account. I leaned back in the passenger seat. Jim, I need you to do something for me. Something that might seem strange. At this point, nothing seems strange. I want you to anonymously tip off the wedding vendors that payment might be an issue. Nothing dramatic. Just suggest they might want to confirm funds before delivery. You want to sabotage your son's wedding? I want to create pressure. When people are under pressure, they make mistakes. When they make mistakes, they reveal who they really are. Jim was quiet for a long moment. And you want them to reveal themselves in front of 200 people. I want the whole town to see exactly what kind of people they've become. With my money, using my reputation. We drove in silence for a while, heading toward Riverside. As we got closer to my old neighborhood, I could see the farm in the distance. My farm. The house where I was born. Where I'd planned to die. There was a sold sign in the front yard and a moving truck in the driveway. The new owners were already moving in. 43 years of my life, packed up and hauled away like it never mattered. Jim, one more thing. Yeah? I need you to RSVP me for the wedding. RSVP you? Frank, they think you're dead. No, they think I'm dying. There's a difference. And I think it's time for Trevor to learn what that difference looks like. I smiled as we drove past the farm. In 3 weeks, at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, my son was going to get the education of his lifetime. And 200 guests were going to be his teachers. May 2nd, the day the whole town learned I wasn't as dead as my son had hoped. I'd been staying at the Hampton Inn on the outskirts of Riverside, keeping a low profile while I recovered and planned. But isolation wasn't going to serve my mission. I needed allies. I needed witnesses. I needed the community to understand what had really happened. First stop, Morrison's Hardware. Bill Morrison had been my neighbor for 30 years, had called me while I was in Switzerland. His store was the unofficial town communication center. Nothing happened in Riverside without Bill hearing about it first. The bell above the door chimed as I walked in. Bill was behind the counter, reading glasses perched on his nose, going through invoices. He looked up, and I watched his face cycle through confusion, shock, and something like joy. Frank Sullivan. Jesus Christ, Frank, we all thought. I know what you thought, Bill. Mind if we talk? He came around the counter fast as his 70-year-old legs would carry him. Frank, sit down. Hell, you look good for a dead man. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I spent 20 minutes telling Bill the whole story: the surgery, the farm sale, the phone call with Trevor and Madison. Bill's face got redder with each detail. That son of a bitch sold your farm while you were in surgery? 3 days after, but yes, and bought himself a Porsche. $85,000. Cash. Bill was quiet for a long moment. Frank, I've got to tell you something that's going to piss you off. Go ahead. Trevor held a memorial service for you, right here at First Presbyterian, 3 weeks ago. My stomach dropped. A memorial service? Said you were too weak for visitors, that the family wanted to celebrate your life while they processed your transition. That's the word he used. Transition. How many people came? Packed house. Maybe 200 people. Pastor Williams did a beautiful service. Trevor gave a speech about carrying on your legacy, about how proud you'd be of the choices he was making. I closed my eyes. What kind of choices? Said he was using his inheritance to build the life you'd always wanted for him. Modern life, he called it. Said you'd told him to dream big and not be held back by old thinking. And people believed him? Bill shrugged. Frank, your son stood up in front of God and the whole community and lied about a dying man's wishes. Who questions that? Did anyone think it was odd that there was no body? No actual death? Trevor said you wanted to be cremated in Switzerland. Said it was your dying wish to have your ashes scattered in the Alps where you'd found peace. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The Alps? Bill, I've never been hiking in my life. I know that. You know that. But Trevor painted this picture of you having some kind of spiritual awakening in that hospital. Said you'd called him and told him to sell the farm, to use the money to live fully, and nobody questioned it? Bill looked uncomfortable. Frank, I've got to be honest. Some of us thought it was weird how fast everything happened. The sale, the spending, the wedding planning. But Trevor seemed so, I don't know, confident. Sad, but confident. Like a man carrying out his father's last wishes. What about now? Now that you know I'm alive? Now I'm wondering what else he lied about. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. Bill, I need to ask you a favor. Anything. Don't tell anyone you've seen me. Not yet. Frank? I'm going to Trevor's wedding, Saturday afternoon, and I want it to be a surprise. Bill stared at me for a long moment. Frank, that boy's got 200 people coming to that wedding. People who were at your memorial service. People who heard him talk about honoring your memory. I know. When you show up alive, it's going to destroy him. Publicly. Completely. I looked Bill right in the eyes. Good. He nodded slowly. You want me there? As a witness? I want everyone there, Bill. Everyone who was at that memorial service. I want them to see what Trevor Sullivan really is when the lies stop working. Consider it done. As I left Morrison's Hardware, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt like myself again. Frank Sullivan, not victim, not invalid, not burden. Frank Sullivan, who was about to remind his son that respect isn't inherited. It's earned, and sometimes it has to be taken back. May 7th, the day my resurrection became front-page news. I hadn't planned on involving the media. My original strategy was simple. Show up at the wedding, present evidence, let social consequences follow. But sometimes the universe has better ideas than you do. Sarah Chen from the Riverside County Herald called me at 8 a.m. Mr. Sullivan, this is Sarah Chen from the Herald. I'm wondering if you have any comment on some rumors that have been circulating around town. What kind of rumors, Miss Chen? Well, sir, several people have reported seeing you around town this week, which is interesting given that your son held a memorial service for you 3 weeks ago. I smiled. Bill Morrison had kept his word about not telling anyone directly, but Riverside is a small town. Word spreads like wildfire in wheat season. Miss Chen, would you like to meet for coffee? I think we have quite a bit to discuss. 1 hour later, I was sitting across from Sarah Chen at Mabel's diner, watching her face change as I told the whole story. Every detail. The surgery, the farm sale, the recorded phone call, the wedding expenses. She took notes, asked smart questions, verified facts. Mr. Sullivan, this is incredible. You're saying your son sold your farm and spent the money while you were recovering from heart surgery? That's exactly what I'm saying, and I can prove it. I showed her the bank records, the receipts, the social media screenshots. Her eyes got wider with each piece of evidence. And you're planning to confront him at his wedding? I'm planning to attend my son's wedding, as any loving father would. Sarah leaned back in her booth. Mr. Sullivan, this is a hell of a story. But if I publish this before the wedding, it'll ruin the whole thing. Your son will know you're coming. Miss Chen, let me ask you something. How long have you been a reporter? 8 years. In 8 years, have you ever had a story this good land in your lap? She laughed. Never. Then trust me when I tell you that waiting until after Saturday will give you a much better story than anything you could write today. You want me to wait until after the wedding? I want you to be at the wedding, with your camera, and your recorder. Because what happens on Saturday afternoon is going to be the kind of story people in this town talk about for the next 20 years. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Sullivan, are you sure about this? Once this comes out, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son. My relationship with my son ended the day he decided I was dead enough to steal from. What happened Saturday is just making it official. She nodded and closed her notebook. Okay, I'll be there. But Mr. Sullivan, I have to ask, why are you doing this? Why not handle it privately? Because private lessons don't stick, Miss Chen. Trevor needs to understand that actions have consequences, and this community needs to understand what kind of man they've been celebrating. And you're okay with destroying him publicly? I thought about that question for a long moment. Miss Chen, my son held a memorial service for me while I was alive. He told 200 people that I was dead, that I'd given him my blessing to sell everything I'd worked for. He used my supposed death to justify spending my life savings on toys and parties. So this is revenge? This is education. For Trevor, for Madison, and for anyone else who thinks elderly parents are just obstacles to their inheritance. After Sarah left, I drove to the country club to do some final reconnaissance. The wedding was in 4 days, and I wanted to see the setup, understand the layout, plan my entrance. The place was buzzing with activity. Vendors delivering flowers, staff setting up tables, Madison and her mother directing traffic like they were planning a royal coronation. I parked across the street and watched through binoculars. Madison looked stressed. She was on her phone constantly, gesturing frantically, clearly arguing with someone. Vendor problems, maybe. Payment issues. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Mr. Sullivan, this is Janet from Premier Flowers. We met at your neighbor's funeral last year. Wanted you to know we're supposed to deliver $15,000 worth of orchids for your son's wedding Saturday, but payment hasn't cleared. Thought you should know in case there's been some mix-up with the accounts. I texted back, Thank you, Janet. I'll look into it. Another text, this one from the photographer. Frank, this is Mike Torres. Shot your neighbor's anniversary last summer. Your son owes me $8,000 balance for Saturday's wedding. He's not returning calls. Any chance you can help sort this out? Then another, the DJ, the transportation company, even the country club, asking about final payment for the reception. It was happening. The financial house of cards was collapsing just days before the wedding. Trevor had spent so much of my money on toys and vacations that he couldn't even pay his own wedding vendors. Perfect. I spent the rest of the day returning calls, having quiet conversations with vendors. I didn't promise to pay anyone. I just listened, took notes, and confirmed what I already suspected. Trevor and Madison had painted themselves into a corner. They'd planned a wedding they couldn't afford with money they'd stolen from a man they thought was dead. On Saturday, the whole town would learn what happens when your lies catch up to you, in front of 200 witnesses, with the local newspaper recording every word. May 15th, 3 days before the wedding, the day I compiled everything into what the military calls a target package. I'd been working out of my hotel room for 2 weeks, turning it into a command center. Documents spread across the desk, laptop open, printer running constantly. Evidence sorted, categorized, cross-referenced. Every receipt, every bank statement, every social media post, every recorded conversation. Time for the final accounting. I opened a new spreadsheet and titled it Trevor Sullivan Financial Audit, March 15th, May 18th, 2024. Row 1, farm sale proceeds, $3.2 million. Deposited March 18th, while I was still unconscious in intensive care. Row 2, Porsche Cayenne, $85,000. Purchased March 20th, same day my doctors told me I'd survive. Row 3, European vacation, $45,000. Flights, hotels, restaurants, shopping. 3 weeks of living like lottery winners while I learned to walk again. Row 4, wedding venue deposit, $25,000. Paid March 25th, before they even bothered to call and check if I was still breathing. I kept going, line by line, dollar by dollar. The wedding dress, the photographer, the flowers, the rings, the bachelor party, the rehearsal dinner, the honeymoon. Every expense documented with receipts, bank records, social media posts proving the dates and amounts. Total spent in 8 weeks, $1.9 million. Nearly $2 million of my money gone. Spent on luxuries, vacations, and a wedding that cost more than most people's houses. But the money wasn't even the worst part. I opened another document, Timeline of Lies and Betrayals. March 15th, I enter surgery in Switzerland. March 18th, Trevor tells community I'm not expected to survive. March 18th, farm sold. Same day, no waiting for actual death. March 20th, Porsche purchased while I'm still in ICU. March 28th, Trevor's Facebook post about Dad would have wanted us to be happy. April 2nd, memorial service held while I'm recovering in Swiss hospital. April 10th, recorded phone call where Madison calls me a burden, and Trevor says the farm was a prison. April 15th, wedding invitations sent describing it as celebration of new beginnings. Each entry supported by documentation, bank records, medical files, social media screenshots, recorded conversations, witness statements from neighbors. But I needed more than just financial records. I needed to document the emotional crime, the betrayal of trust, the violation of everything a family should represent. I called my old platoon sergeant, Bobby Martinez. He lived in Colorado now, but we'd stayed in touch for 50 years. Frank, holy shit, buddy, I heard you died. That's what I'm calling about, Bobby. I told him the whole story. Bobby listened without interrupting, the way good soldiers do when they're getting a mission briefing. Jesus, Frank, your own son? My own son. What do you need from me? Character witness. Someone who can speak to what the farm meant, what I sacrificed to build it, what it represents. Frank, I was at your dad's funeral. I remember when you inherited that place, how seriously you took the responsibility. That land wasn't just property to you, it was legacy. That's exactly what I need people to understand. You want me to come to Kansas? I want you to come to a wedding, Bobby, Saturday afternoon. Bring your dress uniform if you've still got it. My dress uniform? Frank, what the hell are you planning? I'm planning to remind my son that some things are sacred. Family, honor, respect for your elders, and I'm planning to do it in front of everyone he's been lying to. After I hung up with Bobby, I called 2 more veterans from my unit. Then I called my old pastor from before Pastor Williams took over. Then I called the bank president who'd held my mortgage for 20 years. By Thursday night, I had 8 character witnesses confirmed for Saturday. People who'd known me, known my father, understood what the Sullivan farm represented in this community. The final piece of my preparation was the hardest. I sat down and wrote a letter to Trevor. Not the letter I wanted to write, full of anger and hurt and betrayal. The letter I needed to write. The one that would explain clearly and calmly exactly what he'd done and what it meant. Dear Trevor, it began. By the time you read this, you'll understand that your father didn't die in Switzerland, but you might also understand that something did die there. Your father's trust in you, his belief that family meant something more than money, his hope that the values he'd tried to teach you had actually taken root. I wrote for 2 hours, 4 pages of careful, measured words explaining how he'd broken not just laws, but sacred bonds, how he'd stolen not just money, but legacy, how he'd betrayed not just me, but every generation of Sullivans who'd built what he'd so casually destroyed. I ended with this. I loved you enough to give you everything. You loved yourself enough to take it while I was helpless to stop you. On Saturday, you'll learn what happens when love meets consequences. I sealed the letter in an envelope and wrote Trevor Sullivan on the front in my best handwriting. Tomorrow, I'd hand deliver it, at his wedding reception, after he learned his father wasn't dead. After 200 guests learned what kind of son he really was. After the whole town understood that some betrayals deserve legendary consequences. May 18th, 4:15 p.m., the moment my son learned that dead men sometimes rise to settle accounts. I parked across the street from Riverside Country Club at 3:30. The parking lot was full. Mercedes, BMWs, Audis. Madison's crowd, mostly. People with money who appreciated expensive weddings funded by stolen inheritances. Through my binoculars, I could see the ceremony had just finished. Guests were filing out of the chapel area toward the cocktail reception. Trevor in his $3,000 tuxedo, Madison in her $8,000 dress, both of them glowing with the satisfaction of people who'd gotten away with the perfect crime. Bobby Martinez pulled up beside me in his rental car, 71 years old, still ramrod straight in his dress uniform. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Combat Infantry Badge, every ribbon earned in jungle firefights 50 years ago. You ready for this, Frank? I've been ready for 2 months, Bobby. My other witnesses were already inside. Sarah Chen from the Herald, camera ready. Doc Peterson, who'd delivered Trevor. Pastor Michaels, who'd baptized him. Bill Morrison, who'd watched him grow up. 8 people who could speak to what the Sullivan name had meant in this community before Trevor decided to auction it off. At 4:20, I walked through the front doors of Riverside Country Club like I owned the place, which, considering who'd paid for this reception, I basically did. The cocktail hour was in full swing. 200 guests, premium bar, servers passing appetizers that cost more per bite than most people spend on lunch. I recognized faces from around town mixed with Madison's photography friends and Trevor's teaching colleagues. I moved through the crowd slowly, deliberately. A few people did double takes, confused looks, whispered conversations. Frank Sullivan? Wasn't he? Then I saw Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor for 30 years. Her champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Frank? Frank Sullivan? The conversation around us stopped. Heads turned. The ripple effect spread outward like a stone dropped in still water. Voices dropping to whispers, then to silence. By the time I reached the center of the room, maybe 50 people had recognized me. The rest were staring at the growing circle of shocked faces, trying to understand what was happening. That's when Trevor saw me. He was standing near the bar, laughing at something one of his groomsmen had said. Madison was beside him, posing for photos, radiant in her stolen money dress. Trevor glanced toward the commotion, probably annoyed that something was disrupting his perfect moment. Our eyes met across 30 feet of polished marble and crystal chandeliers. I watched my son's face cycle through confusion, recognition, terror, and something like physical pain. The color drained from his cheeks. His champagne glass fell from his hand, exactly like Mrs. Henderson's had, exploding against the floor. Dad? The word came out like a prayer, or maybe a curse. The entire room went silent. 200 people, frozen in place, staring at the impossible sight of a dead man walking toward his son's wedding reception. I stopped 10 feet away from Trevor, close enough that everyone could see both of us clearly, close enough that my voice would carry to every corner of the room. Hello, son. Beautiful wedding. Thank you for the invitation. Trevor's mouth opened and closed like a fish on dry land. Madison grabbed his arm, her perfect Instagram smile cracking like old paint. I know what you're all thinking, I said, raising my voice so everyone could hear. You're thinking Frank Sullivan is supposed to be dead. You're thinking you were at his memorial service 3 weeks ago. You're thinking his son Trevor gave a beautiful speech about carrying on his father's legacy. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cell phones were coming out. People were recording. Well, here's the thing about legacies, I continued. Sometimes they need to be reclaimed from thieves. Dad, please, Trevor whispered. Not here. Not now. We can talk about this privately. Privately? I smiled. Like the private conversation you had with Madison on April 10th? The one where she called me a burden and you said my farm was a prison? I pulled out my phone and hit play. Madison's voice filled the room, crystal clear through the country club's sound system. You're old. You're sick. And frankly, you're becoming a burden on people who are trying to build their own lives. Then Trevor's voice. That farm was a prison you built and wanted me to inherit. The silence in that room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. That recording was made while I was recovering from experimental heart surgery in Switzerland, I said. Surgery I survived, by the way. Surgery I survived while my loving son was selling my farm and spending the money on European vacations and sports cars. I pulled out the manila folder and opened it methodically. Let's talk about legacy, Trevor. Let's talk about what you did with mine. I held up the first document. Farm sale, $3.2 million, completed March 18th, while your father was unconscious in intensive care. Gasps from the crowd. Mrs. Henderson was crying. Porsche Cayenne, $85,000, purchased March 20th. Same day my doctors told me I was going to live. I held up the receipt, turned it so everyone could see. European vacation, $45,000. 3 weeks in Paris, London, and Rome while I learned to walk again. More documents. Wedding expenses to date, $150,000. Paid for with money stolen from a man you told everyone was dead. Trevor found his voice. Dad, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing all of us. Am I, son? Let me ask this room something. How many of you were at my memorial service? Dozens of hands went up reluctantly. And how many of you heard Trevor's speech about honoring my wishes? About how I'd told him to sell the farm and live his dreams? The hands stayed up. People were looking uncomfortable now. Funny thing about that, I said. I never said any such thing. In fact, the last conversation I had with Trevor, before my surgery, I asked him to take care of the land, to preserve what 4 generations of Sullivans had built. I turned to face my son directly. Instead, you buried me before I was dead. You held a memorial service while I was alive. You lied to this entire community about my wishes, my death, my legacy, and you used those lies to justify stealing everything I'd worked for. Trevor was shaking now. Dad, you don't understand. We thought... The doctors said I might not make it. They never said I was dead. But that was close enough for you, wasn't it? Close enough to start spending my money. Close enough to start planning your celebration. I looked around the room. Ladies and gentlemen, you're not just at a wedding. You're at a crime scene. Every flower, every piece of music, every bite of food, every drop of alcohol, all of it paid for with money stolen from a man my son told you was dead. Madison finally spoke up, her voice shrill. This is insane. Frank, you're having some kind of breakdown. Security. Security? I laughed. Madison, honey, let me save you some trouble. I pulled out my final document. Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I filed a complete report yesterday. Every transaction, every lie, every piece of evidence. They're very interested in meeting with you both. That's when Trevor broke. Dad, please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes. I can fix this. We can work this out. Can you bring back my farm, Trevor? Can you undo the memorial service? Can you give back the respect you stole from my name? I can pay you back. Every penny. With what money, son? You've spent almost $2 million in 8 weeks. On cars and vacations and parties. The vendors are calling because you can't even pay for this wedding. The room erupted in whispers. Madison's face went white. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. You're going to live with the consequences of your choices, both of you. This community is going to know exactly what kind of people you are, and I'm going to make sure that every time someone mentions the Sullivan name, they remember this moment. I handed Trevor the sealed letter I'd written. Your real inheritance, son. Read it when you're ready to understand what you've lost. I turned to face the crowd one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. The reception is over. I walked out of that country club with my head high, Bobby Martinez beside me, leaving behind 200 witnesses to the most expensive education my son would ever receive. Outside, Sarah Chen was waiting with her camera. Mr. Sullivan, how do you feel? I smiled, like myself again. 3 months later, August 15th, I'm sitting on the porch of my new place, a modest house in town, walking distance from Morrison's Hardware and Mabel's Diner. Not the farm I was born on, but home enough for an old soldier who's learned that some battles end with strategic withdrawals. The fallout was swift and complete. Trevor and Madison's marriage lasted exactly 6 weeks after the wedding. Turns out, public humiliation and financial ruin aren't great for marital bliss. She filed for divorce in July, citing irreconcilable differences and misrepresentation of assets. Translation, she married him for my money, and when that dried up, so did her love. Trevor lost his teaching job. Hard to maintain classroom authority when the whole county knows you stole from your dying father. He's working construction now, learning what honest labor feels like at 41 years old. The legal resolution was simpler than expected. Trevor couldn't return the farm that was gone forever. But he did sign over everything else: the Porsche, the wedding gifts, what remained in his accounts. About $400,000 total, enough for me to buy this house and live comfortably for my remaining years. More importantly, he signed a statement admitting what he'd done. Full confession. Wyndham saw it, but the lawyers filed with the court insurance against any future attempts to rewrite history. The community response surprised me. I thought people might see me as vindictive, cruel, excessive. Instead, they saw justice. The memorial service had bothered more people than I realized. The speed of the farm sale, the lavish spending, Trevor's sudden transformation from struggling teacher to luxury lifestyle, it had all felt wrong to folks who'd known our family for generations. Sarah Chen's article won a state journalism award. The resurrection of Frank Sullivan became required reading in her college journalism classes. Sometimes justice needs a good storyteller. I haven't spoken to Trevor since the wedding. He's written letters, apologies, explanations, requests for forgiveness. They go straight into the fireplace, unopened. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with words. But I'm not bitter. Bitterness is what you feel when injustice goes unpunished. I feel something cleaner, complete. My legacy isn't a farm anymore. It's a lesson, a reminder that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And sometimes, when people forget that truth, they need an old soldier to remind them. Some education is expensive. Some education is worth every penny.